Well, thank you so much for helping me in my project. Could you maybe talk a little bit about yourself and introduce
Thank you
yourself?
for having me, Nathan. So I'm an accountant. I haven't studied anything related to science since 10th grade. Um, Focus more on the business side and I audit right now. So gotten a little away from the physical sciences. So that's why this topic is really interesting to me.
But accounting is very important too. Lots of money is involved, spent by lots of people, making sure that they're actually spending it on the things
Mhm.
that they're supposed to is key.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so, what are some of your hobbies and interests?
I like to read. I like to read across the board, pretty much anything, but a lot of nonfiction more than anything. A lot of movies and music, and I'm interested in classical music. Like over the last few years, I've developed an interest in Indian classical music. Uh, yeah, those would be the main ones.
Like, what are some books that you like to read?
A lot of history and politics. So I've been reading. So if you take the Indian subcontinent, I like to read it from all sides, from the different ideologies to see how people talk about the same situation, uh, but it sounds like completely different. And so then I did that same thing for Israel and Palestine, read it from both the Israeli point of view and the Palestinian point of view, and it's really interesting. Sometimes it's hard to tell they're talking about the same things.
I I mean, India, I think, what is the most populous country right now. Um, so anytime you have people, you have politics, and anytime you have more people, you have even more politics.
Politics. Yeah, that's exactly right.
So, how does a country like India come up with a shared vision for itself to, um, I mean, it seems really difficult. I mean, like
It is.
the
It is
US,
really difficult. And to a great extent, there isn't a shared vision, and that's its biggest problem. Because the whole idea of uniting the Indianness almost came as an idea of, well, we are united against something, rather than, I mean, when we moved to the US, I find small things like an American flag is flown on most homes. There's so many rules around the Indian flag that you can't just fly it on top of your home every day. There's rules about uh, how it has to be flown. It needs to be unfurled at a certain time, taken down at a certain time. You can't wear anything that's like the flag, and it's just, we grew up with those kind of rules. And then when I see it here, and I'm like, but I think fundamentally, a lot of India is still divided into, well, I'm from this region or this language or religion or whatever, um, at a primary level, and we are Indian next. Whereas I think here, people are primarily American before they are anything else. So
and
that is a difference.
it's kind of different. India, in terms of like if you look at a country like France, it has like kind of like a historical border that's been there for a long time, common language across the entire
Yeah.
region. The food maybe varies a little, but perhaps not that different.
Yeah.
But then whenever you look at India, like you were saying, you have like my wife, her family traces their heritage back to Sindh, and they speak Sindhi. They make Sindhi food,
Hmm.
and we have some friends that are from different places, and
Yeah.
it's just kind of interesting. I think of India more as like Europe than
Hmm.
maybe a single country.
Yeah. Because it's hundreds of languages and dialects. Every state or even different districts in a state have different foods. So it's different clothes, it's different beliefs. And even if you take the predominant religion, Hinduism, there's so many forms of it, and there's so much variety in it. that there isn't like one monolith that binds people together. So despite that, there's been independence and democracy for so long, and people sort of have coexisted peacefully. I think that's an achievement. There's chaos, but at least it's democratic.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you have democracy and then you have mob rule, right? Democracy is where people are actually taking an interest in the way that their government society is going,
Hmm.
uh, and they're actually making choices for themselves.
Yep.
And then mob rule is where you're just part of a mob and you just do whatever that mob is doing.
Yep.
And I think you see that with the U.S. politics descending more and more into like the mob
Hmm.
situation. And
Sadly, India too, in the recent years.
exactly. And I heard in India, they have like the caste system, right? With everybody
Hmm.
from a different caste. And I was reading a book on it, and they said you don't cast your vote, you vote your caste.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Again, sad but true. And it exists like that, and it's kind of become a little more limiting. And see, somebody like me that grew up in urban India and didn't really have much to do with rural India, we didn't feel caste as much. It didn't matter. And the irony is that the common language binding a lot of people like me is English in India, because like I moved around a lot. My father moved every 3 years or so, and so I've lived all over India now, mostly on the eastern seaboard and north, south, everywhere. So it is different languages, different everything. English was the common thing. No, I didn't come across like caste as a positive or a negative. Not at school, not at work. I didn't face it, but it's a reality in the vast majority of the country, and it's a big thing. And it's also, in rural or even small towns, you have, oh, you are, such and such caste, and you are doomed to certain things, and you always have to be like that. And that's just crazy. And it's crazy for me because I belong to this caste. It's very interesting. So we are castes, and the history of this caste is very interesting because this is part of the what they used to be historically was the lowest caste. But through education, they ended up being advisors to the kings, and so they became like the professors, the ministers, the accountants, and all the professionals, the doctors, and all of that. And so now, if you earlier it used to be like a four-tier thing. You had the Brahmins, then the rural or the warrior class, then uh, the business people, and then the lower classes. So this particular caste started at the lower caste, and through education rose to like the second kind of tier. But if you said this even to my parents, you might get beaten up, because we don't even acknowledge our history anymore, because we're just upper caste and that's it.
I've been reading a nonfiction book lately called Capital by
Mhm.
Thomas Piketty.
Okay.
And,
Do you
it
like it? Do you recommend it?
so far so good.
Okay.
I'm only 109 pages into it, and that's 11% of the book, which those stats are really easy to give you since I'm reading it on the Kindle and it has it at the bottom.
Well, yeah, yeah, but I wrote that down. I'm always looking for book recommendations.
Yeah, it looks at long-term historical trends in terms of wealth distribution, income, kind of like the struggle between people getting their wealth from income versus from owning things.
Hmm.
I'm in the part where it's talking about like capital, uh, crossing borders and how that affects maybe countries. The thing that we've been telling ourselves from like a globalization standpoint is that if you allow for people to invest in your country, then your country be developed and that improve the life for your people, because essentially that capital is going to look for higher rates of return, and eventually the marginal rates of return will, balance out across all your
Mm-hmm.
countries.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is that capital is looking for return on capital. It's not looking for income for the people that live in the place. And
Exactly.
oftentimes, what you see is that whenever you have a lot of investment from outside in a country, um, that uh, essentially the people aren't invested in, and they actually have to work in like the worst conditions in order to return that capital, and it becomes just oppressive. And if you look
Yeah.
at like China and Korea and Japan, those countries were able to develop based upon investing in themselves and kind of
Mm-hmm.
financing that themselves. And
Yeah.
it's kind of interesting thought, but it also talks about how like the long-term rate of growth is really less than 1% historically speaking,
Yeah.
um, and how what we've been through for the past 100 or 200 years may have been kind of at odds with normal historical growth. So that's kind of interesting. But anyway, the things that you were talking about made me think of something that Thomas Zubrin said. He's the founder of the Mars Society, and he talks about if you look at all the bad things that happened in the 1900s, they all happened because people had this concept of resource scarcity,
Mm-hmm.
that there's not enough for everybody. And if I want to improve my life, ultimately I have to be able to get more stuff, and that has to come from other people. And so you
Mm-hmm.
see like Germany in World War One using the death of the Archduke as an excuse to start a
Yeah.
war with its neighbors to try to take over more territory. And then you really see that in World War Two, where you not only have Germany taking over Europe, but then also eliminating um, large parts of its own population.
Yeah.
Um, and so this concept of resource scarcity will drive people to compete and conflict with each other. And if you look at a place like India, um, there's a limited amount of land in India. And if somebody wants to have a bigger yard, that has to come from someplace, right?
Totally.
Um, but this author or this person, Robert Zubrin, he says that actually, this is a wrong notion that there's a limited amount of resources, because he says that, in reality, there's no such thing as a natural resource. There's only raw materials, and it's
Mm-hmm.
um, humans' ability, creativity, and ingenuity that takes a resource and turns it into, uh, you know, takes a raw material and turns it into a
It's a
resource.
resource.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, if you look at Mumbai versus Tokyo, I was wondering, have you been to Tokyo?
Very, very briefly, not seen enough to be able to compare.
I lived in Tokyo for I think 3 weeks, and I've been in Mumbai for about 3 weeks. So I have a 3 week person's observation of both places, which is very shallow, I'm sure. But I will tell you that I think Tokyo and Mumbai have about the same number of people, but like the level of living is completely different. And so I wonder if it's not too many people, but not enough organization. I was wondering what you thought about that.
I think you probably have a point there, but I think I was reading it somewhere that colonialism and the post-colonialism, because of the impact that it left, has made kind of a bunch of people react differently. So if you see, I mean, the way I would characterize India is Indians became very inward looking. As long as my house is clean, I don't care if the street outside is filthy. It just stops at my gates. And inside will be brand spanking, shining clean. But I'll take all my trash and leave it right at my doorstep, and I don't care about that because that's not mine. There was Whereas if I contrast that with the US, there's a huge sense of community here, and everything is kind of ours. And like if you have a church group or my subdivision or whatever, I care not just about what's inside my house but also what's around me. So there is that. Then if you look at Africa, again, I think the countries that have been just exploited for so long and that they're trying to emerge from that, when you're trying to just exist for such a long time, your spirit is broken to an extent where it's difficult to think about the next guy. And I think I draw that parallel between the poorer nations in Africa, a lot of India, where you just don't think about the next person. And it'll come in small things, like you're going up in an elevator. If I'm doing that in the US, I smile at everybody and we say hello to everybody. In India, people look at me funny now when I do that, because it's not the done thing. And it's not that Indians are not friendly, but I think it's just how you end up being affected by circumstances over a long period of time.
And I've noticed a difference even in the US between the countryside and in the cities with
Yeah.
kind of seeing each other.
Hmm.
And I think it's probably to be expected, right? If you see a person like once an hour, you're like, hi, how are you doing? But if literally there's like a tangle of people and you have to see people every second, you're like, just let me through, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
We were in Fredericksburg once, and just out on our car, we had opened a map and we were looking at it and saying, okay, what do we do today? And this perfect stranger came up to us, spent the next 20 minutes explaining what everything was and giving her recommendations to us of what she thought we should do, because it's her town and she wants us to have the best experience. And to me, that was just incredible. But that small town, that's the time that everybody has. I'm pretty sure if I stood with a map in New York, nobody was going to have that time for me.
I know they're like, stay far away. She might ask for directions.
Yeah.
No, that's very true. Um, so you talked about after people have been kind of oppressed for so long, their spirit gets broken. Um, so what's the process by which it gets renewed? I mean, like what does that take, where they do take an interest?
I would imagine there has to be hope. There has to be something to aspire to, a future to look forward to. So, there's a lot of bright spots in India that I see. For example, the low cost satellite that we were able to launch. I mean, incredible, right? Like you, everybody is trying to do these high tech things, and there that kind of works. So that ingenuity came out of people that grew up there and kind of studied within that, and to some extent that they internalized the scarcity of resources, and they were really able to repurpose the raw material to an effective resource. But it's few and far between. I think when it gets to a tipping point is when we'll see it reach like the next level.
And what's the next level?
So I think a lot of what has happened in India in the last, let's say, 10 or 20 years maybe, is more of a service based economy. We are the outsource center, we are the software center, but we aren't manufacturing. So we aren't turning our raw materials into resources. We are using our brains for outside. And so while there's money floating in the economy, there's no real goods to back it up. So I want to say that for the next level, we need to kind of start from that ground up and optimize that land, which perhaps we are not doing right now.
And the infrastructure,
And the infrastructure,
the
yes.
power generation, distribution, storage, and the ability to move
The
goods and
roads, the
people around.
railway, yeah, yeah.
Health and
Hmm.
just putting people. I mean, you could there's lots of slums in
Yeah.
India as an example. But slums are amazing because I mean they're just developed by themselves, right?
Hmm.
And they're almost always like one story, and you have
Yeah.
all these people living on one story, and it's like if you could take these people and put them like vertically, you
Hmm.
would be able to give them each so much more space and stuff.
Yeah.
But there's
And China has done that
yeah, all
almost
these
across
high
the board, right? Yeah.
exactly. So it's like how do you create And I've been listening to a biography by about Thomas Edison. I'm
Hmm.
not familiar. I mean, how familiar you are with like his work?
I mean, I know his big inventions, but I haven't read much about him. But see, I'm adding that to my list now.
But for every recommendation I give you, you have to give me one too.
Okay, I will, but then I'll send you down this rabbit hole of politics.
Sometimes interesting things are in rabbit holes. Um,
True. Or you could also enjoy comics. I've been revisiting the whole Tintin and Asterix series, and especially because locked up at home, I when I want a break, I really want like light. So, and it's just so incredible. I love losing myself in those kind of comics, where the wordplay in Asterix and the simple storyline of a Tintin.
I'm actually completely unfamiliar with Tintin.
Really, I have the
Yeah,
whole selection.
I
If you want to
maybe
borrow it,
I think I might have to. I'm like the most culturally ignorant person, especially when it comes to American culture.
no, no.
Oh no, I am. My boss has confirmed it. Uh, she starts talking about this singer or this other person. I'm like, who? She's like, you can't tell me you don't know who this person is. So, yeah. But
Next
that
time, just Google the person first.
I know, but it's become a thing now. I can't. It's part of the identity. Sometimes your problems become part of your identity, and then
Yeah,
solving them means you lose part of your identity. So,
yeah. No, can't have that.
but I think everybody knows Thomas Edison in terms of the
Hmm.
inventor of the light bulb.
Light bulb, yeah.
And so you imagine him having like this one great invention,
But he had
but
a lot, right?
he had a lot. He like had something like 60 patents on average a year. Everything from the mining of like iron and development of cement, and he like created bricks, and he made like record players and video like projection machines and um, storage batteries, and it's just like one interesting thing is I learned in this book is in like 1900
Hmm.
about a third of the cars were electric power, and about a third of the
And we need to go
cars
back to that.
were steam power, and about a third of the cars were gas power. And the steam power is really interesting because it would take like an hour to get enough steam to actually drive the car.
Okay. Yeah, that may not work so well.
No, no.
But we can go
Hi.
back. We can do more electric.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, the problem then is the same now as storage capability,
Yeah,
but now
yeah.
you can do it. Have you ridden a Tesla?
I have not. I see it all around, but I have not ridden one yet. They look so fancy, and one of my somebody at work had one. So she took out her key fob and she just made the car move back and forth in the parking lot. It was so cool.
Wow. Yeah, I a friend of mine had one, and he let me drive it from Austin to Houston,
How
and
was it?
we put on auto mode, and it would actually drive itself, and you could like actually tell it how many car lengths away from the car
Hmm.
in front you want to be,
Yeah.
and it would follow the tracks. And there was like this place where they're doing road construction, and you couldn't really see where the things is like take control now, and you have to be ready. Uh,
Wow. And it had enough battery to make it from Austin to Houston?
I think it could have, but it didn't start out with a full charge, so we stopped along the way. It tells you where all the superchargers are, and
Hmm.
we charged it up for 15 minutes, and then we were good enough to go. Um,
Okay.
it's like every minute of charge is like equivalent to like I think 20 miles of travel or something like that. I mean, it's like a really not
Okay.
unrealistic thing. I mean,
Wow. We really need to move to that. Next car.
yeah. I mean, and the thing is, with a gas powered car, you have to have gas to power it.
Hmm.
But with an electric car, you could generate that from gas, coal, solar, nuclear,
Yeah.
wind.
Yeah.
You can even fill it up somebody else's car if you need it,
Yeah.
or whatever. So
Have you been exploring solar power for your home?
I have. I would love to get some.
Yeah.
I think it.
We got that assessment done too, but apparently we don't have enough roof space. to power our house, which is a bummer. We really wanted to get that done. Also because our HOA will only allow it on one side where it's not visible.
Hmm.
So that really restricts it for us.
Yeah, I have the perfect setup for solar. The south side of my roof is the backyard, and there are no trees, and it's like wide and what have you. So I have no excuse. I have to get it. Of course,
That'll be awesome.
Sonia tells me that I can only get it if I agree to stay in this house for 10 years or something like that. So
Yeah, because that's the payoff. See, the accountant has done the return on investment. She's
yeah,
right.
but I'm like, we should just do it anyway. Yeah, but different.
You're unlikely to get a premium when you sell the property. So she's wise.
But she also says, you shouldn't sell the house. We should just keep it regardless if we move someplace else. So it seems like I don't know.
Then you can use that argument.
Yeah, exactly. Um, but I guess in terms of manufacturing in India, um, how do you see any developments along those lines?
Not yet, no. And I think a lot of it is limited by infrastructure or lack thereof. And I think as that develops, we have some hope. There's a lot of individual effort happening in India, non-government supported, just random groups of people doing their own thing. And a lot of what happens in India comes from the grassroots like that. So that's where our hope is, I think, for change to happen.
But I also feel like that a lot of the people I've met in India are very risk averse. Um, they really pretty much like tried and proven ways,
Hmm.
which makes people work really, really hard on a proven path,
Yeah.
but really discourages anybody from trying out new things.
Hmm.
And I was wondering, is that just like a outsider's misconception, or is
No,
that
it's true. It is like that, and I think a lot of it is it's cultural. It's you must get your bachelor's degree and then your master's degree, and you know get married at a certain age and like all of that. So there's all these boxes you're always trying to check, and that societal pressure, I think, kind of makes you risk averse. But I do see a pattern where the youngsters now are being more entrepreneurial, though I will say that the spate of startups in India are mostly again service driven and not product oriented, and hopefully that changes. And so like right now in the COVID economy, a lot of them have taken a beating. So hopefully this causes the shift for people to introspect again and kind of move towards something that's more sustainable and kind of supports itself rather than just depend on, okay, X and Y are doing something, and if I just add this little bit of value, then I can make a cut out of that.
yeah. I had one of my wife's uncles over there was like a a pani puri reseller,
Hmm.
and it's just kind of funny watching the whole chain of pani puris. Type. I mean, I guess it's not really pani puri until you like break it open and actually
Yeah,
put the pani
put
in
all
it.
the thing.
But
Yeah,
what do you call it without that? Just the shell by itself.
the shell is the pani puri. So that
Okay,
is the puri, and then you put the pani in it.
okay, yeah. So a lot of it is being that intermediate person,
Hmm.
and the value you offer is access to a market. But each
Yeah,
level you're adding in your cut, and you're trying to keep people from talking to each other. Good,
exactly. And at some point it becomes unsustainable,
right?
and people kind of say, no, I can talk. And especially, I think maybe earlier when there wasn't so much communication, perhaps it was easier to keep people apart and be the one person who could make things happen. But now people can reach out and connect directly. It's become easier. So the middle person's value kind of goes down. I mean, it also goes up in a lot of ways, but you've got to find that sweet spot. So I think that's the challenge that people are facing right now.
Well, it needs to offer value. Either it provides resiliency, quality,
Yeah.
add-on services, all these types of things. So,
Yeah.
um, so India um, sent a probe around the moon last year and
Hmm.
attempted to land a lander on the moon. I was wondering if you've heard about this.
Yeah. I, I I mean, it was such major news, it was kind of hard to miss for a while, but even otherwise, I would be interested. I do keep track.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are really hung up on the fact that the lander crashed, but the actual probe that went around the moon had like 80% of the scientific instruments, and the
Hmm.
probe was only like 20%. So it was still an
Yeah,
80% successful mission, and learn
exactly.
some things, and next time
Yeah,
it'll be better. And the last time the U.S. landed something on the moon, I think, was in the 1970s.
it's been a
Um,
while. Yeah,
we're going to try to land two things on the moon next year through some private companies, one in Houston and one in Pittsburgh. But it's kind of interesting. Also, India announced last year that they're going to create a human space program. I was
hmm.
wondering if you had heard about that.
Again, heard about it, but I don't know how much progress has been made
From
on
what I
that.
understand,
Yeah,
is they didn't quite get the budget that they wanted, and
yeah.
I imagine this COVID-19 thing,
It
um,
it'll
yeah,
it'll take a while.
it take a while. It may take a decade or two more before they
Yeah.
do anything. So, um, I was wondering how inspirational um, people in India would find these types of things. Are they like, wow, our country's really just as good as everybody else and really making advances, and we're we're becoming a superpower? Are they like, wow, we are having trouble, with feeding people and medical care and these types of things. Why are we doing that? I was just wondering.
I think we have both schools of thought, but I do think that the first school of thought dominates. There's more people who get excited about it, and then that it becomes one of the things that binds everybody together. It becomes a common thread, and it definitely brings national pride to them. And of course, there's always people who in the second camp as well. And it's if you think about it as scarce resources, then there's some validity to that argument as well. But to your earlier point between raw materials and resources, it doesn't have to be one or the other. We just need to work through and make both happen.
Yeah, indeed. This Saturday at our North Houston Space Society meeting, we're having a person from Pakistan come and
I
speak.
saw that. I'm really excited to join. I'm
I
planning
hope
to attend.
that'd be great. Yeah, but she wants to be a astronaut. She ended up going
Wow.
to medicine because there's really not a good path to become an astronaut
Hmm.
if you're a Pakistani citizen.
Yeah.
Um, and she's also taken a lot of her passion to educate school kids about space, taking telescopes to uh, different
Hmm.
groups and having them look up at the stars. And actually, one thing that's really interesting to look at right now is if you wake up about 4, maybe 3:30 in the morning, there's actually a comet that's visible
I
within.
saw about that, and I wake up normally around 5 anyway. So I'm thinking, can I just like you know where I live? Like it's in the heart of Houston. Will I still be able to see it from
I'm not
here?
entirely sure. I think it is fairly bright that you might be able to see it, but I'm not I'm not sure. Like you're in downtown Houston,
Yeah.
it may be really challenging.
Yeah. I feel like the light pollution here may not allow me, but I mean, it did seem really exciting. Like exciting enough to wake up 1 hour earlier for.
Yeah, indeed. Well, I mean, if I can't see it from here, then it'd probably be impossible to see it from there. And
True.
so,
So why don't you get up early tomorrow morning and then you tell me and I'll get up the day after.
okay, I guess a plan. Um, so, but anyway, I was thinking about her. There's always been this rivalry between Pakistan and India. And in fact, a lot of the relatives I've talked to in India, they are really consumed
Hmm.
by Pakistan, and you know, um, some events over the past couple of decades that kind of helped to sharpen that reason. Um, but the same thing true as Pakistan and India. I'm just
Yeah.
wondering if India actually gets a human space program, would Pakistan be like, we need one too, and then she really would have a path to become a astronaut.
If they did it, it would be good for her, right? And it would be a good thing, net net. So hopefully they get inspired to do that.
Of course, one problem is, the Earth is rotating towards the east,
Hmm.
and it rotates like 1,000 miles an hour, right? And you have to be going so fast in order to stay in orbit, otherwise you'll fall back to the Earth. And so we generally launch as much as we can from, towards the east. And if you're in Pakistan, towards the east is not a good direction to be launching things.
True. But it would be nice if these countries would cooperate and come up with something together, because the combined resources would be so much more than whatever either of them can do individually. Of course, that's given the political situation, that's not a reality. But all you have to do is move out of India or Pakistan, Europe, US, Australia, anywhere, and you see that the people are the same and all South Asians get along, just as long as they're outside of those countries.
Yeah, and indeed. A lot of it may have to do with identity.
Hmm.
You need to be part of the group. This is
Yeah,
what the group does.
yeah.
Once you go someplace else, now you've already made yourself not part of the group in some way.
Hmm. And
Mm.
you realize also that there's a lot more in common than a difference. And so you realize that, like you said, your identity changes and your identity kind of becomes a little bit broader to become a part of a group. And then you're like, I don't even know why I didn't like them. They're exactly like me. So
We
you,
need
you
to
see the similarities.
we need to get more people out of the country to go visit other places, so that but
For sure.
maybe get to know more people.
Yeah.
There's this guy in Pakistan, Rehan. His mission is to um, get other people to like interview other people, and they're like going around and interviewing people all over the world. It's really uh, quite an operation
Yeah.
that they're doing.
But I think that's a great initiative, because I think we are afraid of what we don't understand and what we see as different. And then the moment you bridge that gap, that problem goes away. Or at
Yeah.
least it reduces. We understand better, we're more likely to like than not like instinctively. But I think that's great.
Yeah. But talking about the US's moon plans, did you know that NASA was planning to send people back to the moon in 2024?
Hmm.
How'd
Mainly
you?
because I've been following you.
Yes, I've been having an effect.
Yes.
But what do you think about that? I mean, is it like a good thing, bad
I think
thing?
it's a great thing. I think we should do more of this, just the inspiration. Think about when, you know, that 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 speech, right? A small step for a man, a giant leap for mankind. I mean, it's inspired generations, and our minds need food too. So I think it's important, and I think we should do more of these things, because we always have to aspire. We also always have to do more, go further, rise higher. Otherwise, what's our purpose?
Yeah, I know. Uh, some people's purpose is just to have a bigger house than all their neighbors. That's
Okay, but I think this will be good for everyone. And again, I mean, it'll really inspire generations. Not just if we get to see it.
now when you think about space and the future of humanity, what does it look like to you? I mean, like, do you think humans will forever be on Earth and just making like little weekend trips places? Or do you really fundamentally see at some point humanity branching out into the rest of the solar system and maybe beyond? Like, how do you feel about it?
No, I think from like the Star Trek days and all of those shows, we're like, why aren't we already there? Why aren't we already on not just different planets, but just outside our own Milky Way and all of that? Like, why aren't we jetting around? Why are cars still running on roads? Why aren't we just flying around everywhere? And if we can, I think to me the coolest thing in Star Trek and also Harry Potter is when you can just transport yourself to another place without getting into a vehicle, so to speak. So I doubt that I'll get to see any of it, but I think all the things that were unimaginable even 50 years ago are more than reality now. So absolutely, I see no reason why we wouldn't be everywhere and thriving. I know that we have a lot of concerns right now and with the climate change and all that on Earth, but humanity has faced these kind of challenges before, and we've gotten past it, and we found a solution. Of course, then we've created some bigger problems, and then it's still trying to solve them. But I think that's just the nature of life. I think we've got to do more. We've got to go further.
Um, Now you mentioned you don't think like the ability to transport people between places without traveling between it happening in your own lifetime.
Is
And
it happening?
what I don't, not that I know of, but it's really kind of amazing that you really see people come along and completely transform those things. And it takes somebody actually trying to change something, right? I
Mhm.
mean, like the world doesn't get better by itself. It gets
Right?
better because somebody does something,
Yeah.
And I guess wh- why can't that person that does something actually happen during our lifetime? Like what's preventing it from happening now?
Yeah. That's a good point. I mean, I guess just because I don't see the path to it, maybe because just I don't know enough that I can't imagine it. That's why I imagine that I won't see it in my lifetime. I would love to.
Yeah. I feel like and this is going to go right into the heart of your profession. So sorry about that, but it's my own view. Um, used to we needed if you had a guy with a cow who wanted some shoes, you had to go and find somebody that had shoes, and you would have to do
Yeah.
bartering to trade.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody understood there's a cow and these are shoes, and they knew how
Yeah.
cows were made and they knew how shoes were made and they understood what they were used for and all that. And everybody had very concrete ideas on what wealth was and physical things, right?
Yeah.
And then money gets invented, and it is amazing, because now this guy with the cow doesn't have to carry the cow to like 40 different people to find out who has the
Mm-hmm.
shoes, and then they don't have to figure out, well, um, I don't have, 200 shoes to give you for that one cow. So, yeah, they don't have to, it's like magic, right?
Yeah.
But now in today's world, it's like the money has become more valuable than everything it represents. Like, we don't think about educated people are, agriculture and how to get more crops per land, or,
Mm-hmm.
this thing is like really good for us or not. It's all about the money, it's just
Mm-hmm.
like, which in reality can be very disconnected from thing. I mean, just look at the stock market and our economy.
And really has no bearing on reality in so many ways. The stock market, you can have your stock listed there and trading at crazy prices, but you're providing nothing of value.
Yeah, but you get to own more
Hmm.
other stuff, but that other stuff may not actually exist,
Yeah,
and so yeah,
totally.
just
No, I'm with you.
Sometimes I think it'd be good for us to have like a week of bartering. So we're like, wow, so this is really it. Or,
Yeah,
we also don't see the full cycle of things either. Like, I think for a lot of people, food just appears in grocery stores. Like
yep,
the entire process before that is completely invisible and unknown,
yeah,
and and
and completely not understood.
completely not understood. Yeah. And I feel like in order for us to create settlements in space, we have to be able to take this humanity, these systems, and make them really small enough to be transportable. And in the
Yeah,
process, we have to fully understand the full cycle. So I'm wondering if that help educate people somehow. But
I think that'll be really interesting, and I think that'll be awesome to do
I
that.
I mean, you like think of like these refugee camps and
Hmm.
and stuff. I mean, it has a sense of people just sitting around in tents and food coming in. Why couldn't you create like this mobile settlement that could house like several thousands of people, that the water was completely recycled, it grew its
Hmm.
own food, the waste was taken care of, just like kind of,
Wow, I love your ideas, Nathan.
yeah. Well, thank you. um, so if it was safe and affordable, would you have any interest in traveling in space?
100%.
And how safe does it have to be? Like 10 people go without problem, 100, 1,000, a million?
I would be okay with the 100. The problem would be the affordability. I don't have that kind of money. I'm not Elon Musk. I would love to go.
I,
Absolutely love to go.
well, you know, I think it's just a matter of the price coming down. Did you know what Elon Musk is doing in Boca Chica, down there near Brownsville?
Yeah.
You're familiar with
But,
the Starship
but
and what have you?
yes.
Did you know that he's thinking that the same ship could be used 3 times per day, and that
Hmm.
down there they're thinking about being able to make 2 of them per week. And once you
Wow.
start doing that math, like the whole order of
Then maybe we
magnitude,
can afford it.
exactly. I mean, the order of magnitude just becomes crazy, like
Yeah.
something. How far would you go? Just to orbit, to the moon? Would you take a multi-year trip to Mars? Would you go and live on Mars for the rest of your life? Like, how far?
Mm, I think a multi-year trip to Mars sounds like a plan, but I think I might want to come back, just friends, family, that kind of attachment. But a trip sounds like fun.
Well, that's that sounds awesome. So, other than Tintin, any other book recommendations for me?
Um, um, if you're interested in understanding the political landscape of India, two authors that I'll recommend, Ramchandra Guha and Shashi Tharoor. Um, a light author that just leaves you happy, Ruskin Bond,
Ruskin
for an
Bond.
Indian author. I'm giving you all Indian authors so far. And of course, like my all-time favorite, PG Woodhouse. I can pick up any PG Woodhouse anytime, and it'll always make me laugh. I really think he wrote the funniest books ever.
Wow.
And there's something about this British humor. It's just a classic.
I'll have to check that out. I think I might need you to send me the names for the first two,
Okay,
just so
I'll
I
I'll
can.
send you those, and I have a bunch of these books. I can even lend you the books.
Oh, that would be fantastic, because Sonia says that we really don't need any more books because I buy like lots of them. Buying them is easy. Reading
Buying them
them,
is easy, and I have to buy them. I like the feel of books. I must have them.
and they're
It's
so
what I
pretty to
acquire.
look at. And then you can make a stack of
Exactly.
what you read, and you're
Hmm.
like, "Whoa, I read this."
No,
Somehow you
I'm
somehow you don't get that
100%.
same feeling. You're
Yeah,
like,
you don't get that same feeling.
every year I read the same amount.
Yeah. No, I like the feel of paper and just losing myself in a book. And I have a bunch of these. So happy to lend you those as well.
That sounds great. I hope at some
And maybe
point.
I should also come by and borrow from you.
Oh, I know lots of people would be happy about that.
Will Sonia say no need to return them?
I probably. Or she's like, hey, can we keep a bookshelf at your house?
I'll happily keep that too, because when it comes to books, I'm a hoarder.
Yeah.
I like to get my books back, and I'll be happy to take as many books off of anybody's hands as possible.
You know, the Houston Public Library, they have that book sale every year. Have you heard of this?
No.
So every year, the Friends of Houston Public Library have this book sell at the George R. Brown Convention Center.
Hmm.
On Friday, you have to be a member and they sell it by the book.
Okay.
On Saturday, you don't have to be a member, but they still sell it by the book. And then on Sunday, they're just trying to get rid of everything. So they sell it by the bag of book. And you get an entire grocery bag and you just pay for the bag.
When does this happen?
I'm not sure, but it's the Friends of Houston Public Library. And they do it every year. They have the book sale.
I have to go.
Yeah, it's
But don't tell Vivek. Maybe you and I go, we leave Sonia and Vivek out of this.
okay. Sounds like a deal. We could co-rent a storage facility or something.
Yeah, and we won't tell them about it.
Well, you know, one time we used to live in Exeter, New Hampshire, and Christopher and I were going to do like this special thing in like Boston. I think we are going to go play laser tag, and along the way we see this um, super used bookstore, and we go inside, and there's a sign in the front, and I read the sign. I know what the words say, but it doesn't make any sense to me because it says books with this color sticker are free. And what they did was every month they would put a different color sticker on the books. And just
Mhm.
like the Friends of the Public Library, after so many months of it sitting on this at the shelf, they just want to get rid of them. And so literally you could just haul them away. So we filled up our car with like books and stuff. So that was, I
Wow.
know. I know, of course, it's like, dog-friendly places in New England and how to do wedding place settings and, folk dancing for Caribbean uh, people from Canada or whatever. It's like these are not like, the things that would fly off the shelves, of course.
Hmm.
But we got some interesting books from that. So,
But sometimes when you find a book like that, sometimes it can have unintended consequences. So I picked up an Agatha Christie, but it was about some sort of rules of etiquette for women and how women must comport themselves. So, we should be fully dressed up when our husbands come home from work, and that includes wearing lipstick. And all I did with it was I giggled my way through it. I just found it so funny. For me, it was a piece of humor. And I'm like, fat chance. But it was funny.
no, that's great to see how things have moved along. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, is there anything that you wanted to talk about that we didn't talk about?
No, nothing comes to mind. And I really appreciate the time, Nathan. I really enjoyed myself.
I'm glad you did. Yes, I got 1,600 plus days to go through. So if you have friends and family,
I will.
and even not friends, you could send them too.
I'll do that.
Okay, well, you have a good rest of your day
You
then.
too. Bye bye.
Bye bye.